Hey, it's Joe West from the West Barn with
Mike Shimshack.
Today we have Jeff Cohen on, songwriter, producer, publisher. Welcome, Jeff. Before we get started, I wanted to let everybody know to subscribe wherever they're listening. If you are on YouTube, hit the notification bell so it alerts you when we have new videos out. All these podcasts are audio and video. And if you're listening on iTunes and Spotify, go ahead and subscribe. Jeff Cohen is a songwriter, record producer, and publisher. He's had hits with Evan and Jared, Crazy for This Girl, Big and Rich, Holy Water, The Band Perry, Spin Doctors, Macy Gray, Mandy Moore, Sugarland, Josh Groban, tons and tons of number ones in Europe and in the U.S. country charts, tops a bunch of top tens. He's also done a bunch of sync stuff. He's had 6 theme songs, and I don't know if you know about theme songs, but it used to be you could make a metric ton of cash off of them. Like those guys in the Rembrandts that did the Friends song are probably, ruining the day. They wrote it like cherry pie. They might not like it, but their kids are living off of it.
I think they're completely okay with it.
So welcome to the show, buddy. Great to have you.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Mike.
And you're based out of Nashville, but you weren't always from Nashville. Your story is kind of cool. You started off working at BMI, the performing rights organization that pays you whenever your music gets played anywhere in jukeboxes or on TV. And then made your way into the music world, which I think is really cool because I think everybody is that way. It's like everyone's like, oh, I wonder if I could get out of this day gig and do the thing I really want to do. And you did it. So bravo to that.
I can't really say that it was a master plan. And if I hadn't gotten sick at 32 and had to take some time off from BMI, I probably would have been absolutely cool being senior VP there right now. I mean, I loved working for BMI. They were probably one of the greatest companies. They were the greatest company I ever worked for. And they were nice. I was really lucky. I started at $16,000 a year as a secretary in the collection accounting department, and just went out every single night to see bands, and just went downstairs to one of the senior directors of the music department, and I just basically said, hey, I'm Jeff. I work upstairs in licensing. If you need any bands scouted, I'm out every night. If you want me to do any extra paperwork, man, I'll come in and do it anytime after work. And if a secretary job in music opens, I'd love to get an interview, and maybe I'll have a little bit of an advantage because I'll know a little more about what's going on. And he looked at me and said, what are you doing tonight? And I just said, you tell me, what am I doing tonight?
That's awesome.
6 months later, I was his assistant. 2 years later, associate director. 2 years later, director. Then I was director of Warren Chapel. And then BMI was super nice and got me back. The 2 senior directors left. They both, one started a company and one left. And they got me to take both their jobs. And I came back as the senior director of the New York office at 29.
So you've been a songwriter, and so many people, the younger version of me, and so many people that I hear, like brother-in-laws and cousins that want to be in the music business, they're always talking about their big break, and I just wish I had a chance, and you're so lucky and all this stuff. But the reality is that it's just what you do all the time, every day. It's not, you cannot compete in this world if you're waiting on a big break. And, that kind of going out to clubs, it's like you kind of, the consequence of that is becoming the senior VP at BMI, and then being a songwriter and writing all the time, right? You've got to co-write after this. You before you came on, you were on a phone call to England. I mean, it's like the hustle is off the charts, and it's not the work. It's not that it's work. It's that you love to do that. But
yeah, probably not as aggressive as I used to be in terms of aggressive. Aggressive is a word with negative connotation. I'm probably not as full on as I used to be. I mean, I honestly think I was a little more fearless back then, to be honest. But I think, I remember when I was in college, I heard someone say the harder you work, the luckier you get.
Yeah.
And that always stuck in my head. And to me, like when I was at BMI, my first year when I was there, I was living in New Jersey with my best friend from high school because we couldn't afford New York City. So we were living over the bridge in this little apartment, and there was a bus stop 1 block from my apartment. I was taking a 7:30 in the morning bus just to get in on time by 9 o'clock, because as a secretary at BMI, you didn't come in after 9. Like, it was noted. You had to get there before 9. And now, I might or might not have liked to have stopped at the bagel store across the street before and got my bagel and my tea and get there 15 minutes early. I might or might not have. Anyone who knows me knows I do work to support my eating habit. But I will say, I would then work till 5 or 6. And then I wasn't going back to Jersey. I would just go straight out, man. I would just go to the Bitter End or CBGB's or whatever, Brownies, all these places. I mean, I remember when I signed Uncle Tupelo, they were playing this little place on 3rd Avenue and 15th. And I remember saying to them after, I remember first time I saw them, and they were staying at a friend's place in Brooklyn, and their friend was late. And I'm like, look, guys, I'm going to the Cat Club. I've got to go cover this heavy metal band for BMI because no one else wanted to. So they sent me. So I took Jeff Tweedy with me to go see this heavy metal band. We got in the Cat Club. Everyone's in lace and leather. And Tweedy just looks at me. He's like, what the fuck? And I go, tequila?
I met you at a Mercury Lounge where you were out seeing bands.
There you
That's
go.
the first time I ever met you. You were there. And I remember it was kind of a big deal that Jeff Cohen from BMI was there.
Oh, man, no.
Well, that's the moral of the story is that you're never going to want it as bad as somebody who loves it, and it's the big break thing is way overrated. I just want to shake people when they say that to me and say, hey man, it's just like, do what you love.
I agree, Jeff. I agree. I mean, like Mike and I are good friends with Chris from the Spin Doctors. I mean, that came from a night when my roommate, same roommate, came in one night, said he was going to quit his job. He was fed up with Arthur Anderson. And I said, Bob, you're engaged. You're making $30,000 a year compared to my 16. And I said, let's have a drink. So he goes, I don't want to drink in Jersey. Let's go to the city. And I'm like, okay, nothing against New Jersey. We love Jersey, but we wanted to go to the city. And I said, I know this Smoky Blues bar that's upstairs from this restaurant. Let's just go, man. Let's just hang. And I'll drive us in. I'll leave my car. I'll get the bus back and we'll just that. So anyway, the band playing that night was the Spin Doctors.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I walked up to Chris and I was, Bob was 5 sheets to the wind. And I just said to Chris, I'm like, hey man, did you write these songs? And he tells it better than I do, Mike, but I just said, he goes, why? I go, just ask him, man. I think they're great. I don't know if they're originals or not. He goes, yeah. He goes, we wrote them. I go, are they protected? He goes, do you mean, did I write them while wearing a body condom? I go, listen, man, here's my card. I'm a secretary at BMI. If you want, I'll show up next gig in a suit. I already talked to the bartender. I got the name of your band. I'll bring my boss. But I said, you need to protect your songs. You need to have them copywritten. You need to come up with a game plan. You guys are really good. Call me at the office if you want to talk. If not, I'll see you at one of your next shows. Chris called the next day at noon. And I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, nothing. I just got up. And I go, do you want to come by for lunch? Now, I didn't even have an expense account, Joe. He got there. I'm like, man, I'm craving a slice of pizza.
Thankfully. That's $16,000 a year. You couldn't afford much more.
I think that's how we met, isn't it, Jeff? We met through Chris. I met Chris first. He was my first co-writer I ever had.
Oh, no way.
That's so wild. I did a Chris Barron record when I was in New York.
Did you?
Spin Doctors. Yeah. I mean, he's such a sweet, sweet guy.
Which one
Great
did
dude.
Which one did you work on?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it was a solo record after the Spin Doctors.
Oh, Chrysanthemum.
How many did he do after the Spin Doctors? Who knows?
3 or 4, and Shaq and I did one.
Yeah, we did it at Smash Studios on 23rd between 6th and 7th.
I know that place.
Yeah, it's a great place.
Yeah.
Dude, tell me a little bit about what it takes to be you're a songwriter. It's what you do all the time. It's totally a numbers game. You've got how many songs have you written?
Oh my God, thousands.
Right?
It is different being a professional songwriter full time and doing it. When I was at BMI, if I came home one night late or on a Saturday maybe, or if I had a crush on some girl, I'd pick up my guitar and I maybe wrote 4 or 5 songs a year. I mean, and
Right.
they were, sometimes they would take years to finish. I mean, that was sheer hobby. That was sheer just because it was in me and I just felt like doing it. You know, I just played and just enjoyed doing it. And, you know, the end game on that one was I made cassettes for my sisters and made little cassettes for myself. And occasionally friends would get me at a party to pick up a guitar and play, where I'd have to do a disclaimer like, hey, I don't do this full time. I sign bands, you know, I'm not trying to be an artist. And I would do a show on my birthday every year. That was my only concession. I'd do a show on my birthday and we'd have a big party after. And I think Shaq's been to some of those Pancho's Lament shows. I'd made up a name for the band and we'd play the bitter end. He would close the place down for the night. Sometimes I'd get an opener. Sometimes I would just play for an hour or so. And then Kenny would just let us have the place for a party. And that was my birthday party. And the only other gig, Joe, that I ever did was I used to volunteer at a hospital from 6 to 8 on Wednesday nights, the Foundling Hospital on 6th Avenue and 17th. And I would play for the kids. And I made a deal with BMI because one of the writers found out I did that and actually complained about it, that how dare I play. And I basically told BMI, if you take my Foundling Hospital gig off the table, then I'm leaving.
Why would they have an issue with that? Are you taking gigs away from songwriters? Was that the premise?
I was bringing songwriters with me. In fact, the first girl who did the Foundling Hospital with me, we had to tell her to stop coming because she got a record deal and went on tour, and her name was Lisa Loeb.
Oh, wow.
So I replaced her with a girl who was a secretary at Billboard named Cara Diaguardi. And Cara, I mean, people don't know this about her. I mean, that girl showed up every Wednesday and sang for these kids from 6 to 8 and then going to help her mom who had cancer, who was in the hospital after. Mm. So, I mean, she worked harder than anyone. I mean, talk about working hard. That girl worked harder than anyone I've met in my 30 years in the music industry.
So what was the beef? What were they angry? Well, why did they want you to stop?
Hang on, I got allergies this morning for some reason. I can tell you exactly why. There was a band from Chicago who I'd become friendly with. I'd showcased them on South by Southwest. I'd put them on our CMJ show. I'd helped them a bunch, set them meetings up with labels, publishers. And I thought I'd become friends with this dude. And it was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and we had a half day at work. And one of my good friends, his wife was a teacher in Brooklyn, in a real developing area. And she asked me if I'd come in and play for the kids. And I said yes. And I was actually had a meeting with that kid that morning. And I said to him, hey, do you want to come play for the kids with me? And he's like, sure. So we went out to Brooklyn and played for the kids. And then it was that night that my sisters were home from Thanksgiving, and I did a show on like the Wednesday night before Thanksgiving. And then we were all going to go watch the balloons be blown up in Central Park. And it was the only show I did besides my birthday. And I figured I played under a different name. All my sisters, she had like 40 friends come down, and we just had a party night. So I told this kid, I'm like, hey, why don't you come up and do a song at the show, man? There'll be a lot of nice girls there. It'll be fun, and come hang. Well, I get in the office on Monday, and the VP calls me in and tells me that this kid's aunt was like the head lawyer at BMI, and over Thanksgiving basically told the aunt, so this is what your guy does. He basically is taking away gigs from us.
Wow.
It's a mentality of people, you can never underestimate the insanity of other people's thought process.
And I'm sitting there thinking, dude, as your friend, I just brought you to play for kids who barely spoke English and were loving what we were doing. We were having a great time. The kids I had them singing and dancing. It was a nice thing. Yeah. I did a show for my sister's friends and their birthday and had some fun under a different, fake band name. No harm, no foul, man. I mean, the Wednesday night of Thanksgiving, I thought that would be a pretty you don't really have to work night.
One would think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm at a loss for the mentality of people. It's like it does the math, the calculus on that doesn't work out. Like I just don't get that. I don't get people.
Yeah, but you know, Joe, I had that. I mean, Shaq can attest to this. After I left BMI, I mean, I didn't shop my songs when I was at BMI. I mean, within 6 months of leaving BMI, all of a sudden I had 15 TV placements.
Mm-hmm.
If I had been shopping those songs, they would have been placed earlier.
Right, for sure. For sure. It's not like a conflict of interest. And nobody's dying to get into that market of playing for kids, you know, as a volunteer.
I mean, listen, he could have had the kids gig if he wanted. I would have taken a day off, but, you know, I'm just like...
The coveted kids gig. Do like balloon animals and...
We're getting paid. We didn't ask. We were volunteering our time.
Those free gigs. I mean, everybody's chomping at the bit for them.
Jeff cannot have a life outside of getting my career together.
You were telling us a little bit off air beforehand about how you had you were in town and you just had a bunch of string of hits, and there was an artist in town, and you were trying to get on the calendar. Can you recount that story for us?
Yeah, I don't even know if I want to. I mean, it's just, you know what, I can recount that in one way that I have learned from that experience, and that is I underestimated. Well, I didn't complete. I gotta give myself a break on this a little because I did try, but building the right team is incredibly important. And one thing I've learned is it's harder to sell yourself than to have someone sell you. And what I mean by that is when I left and I got really lucky. I mean, I was fortunate. I had the theme for a big WB show. I was doing all the music for that. That led to Dawson's Creek and One Tree Hill and all those shows. And I had the Evan and Jaron song, which was all over the radio. And then I had Big and Rich, which went to the top of the charts. And I couldn't get on almost any right. But the problem was it was so fresh from BMI that none of the major managers or publishers really were taking me seriously.
Yeah.
And I mean, Shaq was there in 2002 and stuff. I mean,
that stigma of being the BMI guy.
I was the BMI guy. I mean, 10 years in, Joe, I still had people asking me if I played an instrument.
Right.
People were still coming up to me and being like, "Oh, you did a record with Chris Barron, man. That's cool that like you produced that and that you know you worked with him." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I kind of wrote some of the songs, well, all the songs with him." Yep, there.
Here's
the moral of that story.
Jeff was like the Rodney Dangerfield. I remember that time period where people just didn't give him any respect because they just didn't think he was capable of doing it because of how he started. You know? Here's
the moral of that story, and this is why I wanted you to retell it, is that there's a perception coming up that once you get a number one, once you get a publishing deal, once you get a theme to a television show, once you get all these things,
going to happen. That's not true.
The perception is that those guys are so lucky. We were talking to Troy Castellano last week, and he has a song that's up for CMA Song of the Year in British Columbia at the CMAs. And I said, you know, most people would think when they're watching that award show that guy does that for a living and is killing it, right? He's got a publishing deal. And the perception, there are always going to be, for the folks that watch this show that are thinking, maybe I'm going to quit my job and become a songwriter. They think Jeff Cohen's life and Mike Shimshack's life and Joe West's life, they think that there is this grass is greener or holy grail moment of a big break where you end up not having to push as hard. And the reality is it is a continual battle of being able to convince people that you should be in the room. And you had 3 or 4 times the amount of cuts on sync that maybe this artist has, and it was tough for you to get in the room. When I was signed,
I mean, Joe, no, you're right, Joe. I mean, the bottom line was, you know, this girl had a manager who was buddies with the guy at Cobalt. The guy at Cobalt really liked this girl and, yes, put her on a bunch of things that I had been asking to get on for the 6 months, a year, maybe 2 years I'd been with them, and they didn't give me one thing.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden this girl came to town with a few TV placements and got in with all these people. And I'm just like, Now, again, having said that, had I had the right manager or maybe the right publisher, you know, and this is another lesson. I was signed out of New York, you know, when I was with Cobalt, when I did that. Okay. When I came down to Nashville, they did not give a shit about me. They saw me as the outside guy. So if someone from like Germany showed up, you know, like someone's daughter, business person from Germany, they would call me.
Yeah.
Basically, because I wasn't inside. And that's all I was saying before, is that align yourself with the right people.
Yeah. I can remember when I was at Sony, they were trying to get some co-writes with me in LA. And I was blown away at how separate the Sony office at LA was from the Sony office in Nashville, like competitors.
Exactly, Joe. You're so right. When I worked at Warren Chappell, and Shaq knows me, I'm just like, dude, we're on the same team. Let's rock this. Right. Well, I went Warren Chappell. I'm like, hey, the BMI awards are out there. I'm going to, you know, why don't I go out there and go out for a week or two and meet all the LA writers and get to know them, so I could hook them up with our New York writers and I can pitch their songs. And they're like, well, yeah, we don't really have it in the budget for you to be out in LA, and the awards, you're based in New York. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, I will fly on my own dime to LA to go to the BMI awards because I've never missed one. I want to go. Can you hook me up with someone in LA to set up meetings? So they set up about 6 or 7 meetings for me. I get to the ASCAP Awards that week, and this writer comes up to me. He goes, oh, so I'm not good enough to meet with you? And I go, what are you talking about? He goes, so you met with my writing partner, but you didn't take the time to write with me. And I'm like, I didn't even know who he was. Turns out that the woman in LA set me up with half of like people who write together, with only one of them.
It's a great way to introduce yourself to the writing team.
And then I found out, really the hard way, one of the writers I met on that trip, I loved one of his songs, and in a real precursor to what we do, he sent me a song and I kept listening, and I'm like, dude, your bridge, your middle 8 is your chorus. I'm like, that is the best part of the song. I said, would you talk to your co-writer? Can I hear a version of it with that being the chorus and move your chorus to the bridge? And he goes, dude, my co-writer's never going to go for that. And I said, okay. So I ran down to my friend Dan Wise's studio and I edited it. And I sent it back to them with the chorus, the bridge as the chorus, and I moved it. And I said, listen, if you don't like it, erase it, delete it, and don't do it. But I swear to God, I feel really strongly about this. And the guy called me back and he's like, holy shit, this is great.
That's cool.
We ended up pitching it. We got the song cut. And when I got the song cut, I called the writer and I was like, man, let's celebrate next time when I'm in LA. He goes, listen, man, he goes, you need to let LA do the paperwork on that. Do not, talk to them. It's got to be her who got the cut. And I'm like, whoa, guy, I just started at BMI. I said, I told her, why don't we just say we did it together? And the LA office is like, no, that's okay. We'll take it from here. We'll hand in all the paperwork and we got this. And I'm like, so I pitched it, got it cut, and you're not going to do this as a team together? And she goes, it's my writer, man. I get the credit. I get the cut.
Your writer that you're not doing anything for.
That was a real wake-up call for me, because at BMI, it wasn't like that.
Yeah.
It worked. I mean, a little bit in Nashville, there's a little bit back then, with like, hey, these are our showcases. You have no input. But for the most part, even the Nashville office was very, 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 BMI was great like that.
I wanted to talk to you too about, you had this business life, and then you start doing the songwriting like professionally and have some hits at country radio, which is like an incredible feat. And then you start to have hits on television, which is a totally different ecosystem. Like, these things don't live together. They're not part of the same matrix. And then you start having hits internationally. It's like, what's the process of like getting involved in those three paradigms?
Well, that actually wasn't, I mean, the fact that I got lucky, and had success in them is one thing, but it actually was a plan, Joe, is that when I quit BMI, I realized really quickly that the doors, as Mike knows, was shut to me at A&R and publishers in New York and LA, and for the most part, Nashville. So my plan was to start by going to international, where I had some friends, but they didn't really know me, and I could go there and basically earn my stripes based on actually the merit of my songwriting. And I also knew that a lot of the artists over there were interested in writing with Americans. It was kind of cool. So over there, I was a bit exotic, and I was pretty good at lyrics. So being able to do a good lyric in English, right, in some of those markets. And I had known that there was an amazing music scene in Sweden, Denmark, Norway, in Germany. So I thought I could maybe go there. And even if it meant just going out and seeing artists in small clubs and being like, dude, you're great. You want to write? And I would just crash on people's couches, do whatever I had to do. So that was one goal. The other goal was to go to LA, stay on my friend's couch, and show up at places where music supervisors hung out. Mm-hmm. And I didn't give them any music. I didn't ask for anything. I didn't pitch anything. I just got to know everyone. And I just got to learn the business and learn the TV, film, sync world. And I found out there was this party called the Honey Pot where all the soups would go on this one night in a month. So I flew out there and went to the party and just had a great time, took a bunch of cards, wrote everyone saying, hey, I'll be back next month. Would love to either drop by some songs or come by and say hi. I had no plan on going back to LA. I figured if a few people wrote me back, I would do it. So 3 wrote me back. So I booked a trip to LA, got like a $300 round trip flight, stayed on my friend's couch, and dropped off a little CD with 3 supervisors and brought them each a coffee bean, when I showed up. And every time I went out, my attitude was just make another friend. Mm-hmm. And just build your network and take your time, and it takes time. And then I got lucky on that, and that one of the artists I was working with, I made a CD, the Ponchos and Men first CD, and one of my friends, this artist, was at a party with one of the heads of the WB network, and she was saying she was bored of a lot of the music she was getting, and he said, stay here, I've got a CD in my car, it's going to freak you out. And he ran to the car, gave her the Ponchos and Men CD, and that was my start in TV film. But to address your first question, my goal when I became a songwriter was to get a song on TV, a song in film. I wanted a song in pop, a song in country. I wanted a song in the Christian market. I wanted a song in pop opera. I wanted to put myself in a position that if one door closed on me, that my career wasn't over.
Yeah.
Because I saw too many writers who only did one thing, and if all of a sudden something went wrong, then they weren't capable of doing other things. The pro and con of that, and there's definitely a pro and con. The con of that is that you don't spend enough time in one market to really rise too high in that or get too big in one market. Whereas like if I had maybe just stayed in TV film after those first few themes and placements and moved to LA like they asked me to and just dove into that market, the way I work, who knows what the ceiling for that would have been in TV film world. If I had, after my first country hit, had come down to Nashville in 2004 and just stayed here and only wrote country and really studied the market and really got into it and wrote with all these wonderful people, because there's some of the greatest writers in the world here in Nashville. If I had just concentrated on Nashville, I probably would have had a lot more cuts and probably thus a lot more radio success. But I wouldn't have been able to do the Josh Groban world.
Right.
Been able to do Macy Gray world. I wouldn't have been able to have 10 songs in the last 5 years on the radio in England.
Right. And, your discography is impressive in any of those categories. I mean, you're always imagining what the next rung of the ladder is, but anyone would be happy with any of the 4 careers you've had, So it's difficult to see it maybe from your perspective, but there is a real, when you're looking at what it is you're trying to accomplish, there is the musicians don't do that. Musicians aren't wired that way. They're wired to look for the guy. Go ahead,
Jeff's
Mike.
Not normal. I've known Jeff for a long time. Jeff, also these experiences having to do a lot of this stuff by himself. Jeff is maybe the most knowledgeable person I know across a bunch of different areas of the music business. He knows publishing as well as any publisher there is. He knows he's one of the best songwriters I've ever seen in my whole life. He's incredible, and Jeff knows everybody.
It's interesting you say that, Mike, because someone asked me, I did an interview recently, and someone said, what are you most proud of in your 20 years or even 30 years in the music industry? And I said, I can answer that without hesitation.
Your friendship with Mike Shimshack?
Friendship with Mike Shimshack is right in there. But actually, you are not far off, Shimshack. That is, what I am most proud of is that I can be in London. I can be in Stockholm. I can be in Copenhagen. I can be in Oslo or Stavanger. I could be in Berlin. I could be in Sydney and Melbourne. I could be in LA, New York, Nashville. And I've got a base of friends now in every one of these places. I was in Milan with my cousin. I was able to call one of the big publishing dudes. He took us out. To me, I was able to, along the way, a lot of my friends would say, you're going to Stockholm for a week. It's costing you like $1,500, to do that trip or $2,000, and then you didn't get any cuts from this trip. And I go, you just missed the point. I said, number one, I just wrote with some super talented people. I said, we might not have got one this time, but we had a great synergy writing. When they come to New York, they know they can call me. When I go back to Sweden, I know they can call them. If we keep taking swings, we're going to hit something.
Right. Yeah. And what's most important is that you got on an airplane and did it. You didn't wait for a publisher to call you and say, we're going to fund you and put you up in this little Airbnb, or you didn't find a sugar daddy at a label, or someone didn't take care of you. You took care of you. You planned, you booked a trip, you put your expectations, at a level that it's like, what is success? And success is, we don't have to hit them all out of the park.
Yeah.
But you hit a couple out and you get yourself a career.
Well, that's the way I look at it, Joe, is that I thought to myself, what's the worst scenario here? Like, what's the worst case? I just spent a week in Sweden with a bunch of cool people playing music, going out for dinners.
Right. Yeah, it's a vacation.
Yeah. So to me, granted, much to the chagrin of my family, did I take vacations during those years? No, I did not. Those were my vacations. And the truth is, that was as fun. I always tell people my favorite vacations I ever took were going on the road with Sugarland to write with them. Yeah. Oh my God, I felt like I just felt like the happiest guy in America when I was doing that. It was fun, man.
It's like you won a radio contest. Yeah. I mean,
it was great. I got to stay on a bus. I'd never been on a bus. I never toured. I mean, I know Mike was a rock star. He played in bands. I never did that, man. I started as a writer when I was almost 34. Pancho's Lament. I mean,
you would not have had nearly as much fun touring the way we toured. I promise you.
Fair enough.
Here's the other thing. Everyone's so stressed out that's trying to make it in the music business. They're so anxious about needing to, they're playing catch up all the time. And if I had one thing I could say to them, it would be chill out. Just go out and do the thing that you do. If you're a shovel, go be a shovel. If you're a tractor, go be a tractor, but find a way to chill out and do your thing. All the good things in life happen when you're doing your thing. How many co-writes have you been in where you have felt apprehensive about singing a melody or putting an idea on the table? And then at the end of the day, your best songs came from co-writes where you were free to do that, where you were just comfortable.
This is what I always say about Jeff. Jeff and I have written a bunch of times together. The way to co-write with Jeff is a conduit more than maybe anybody I've ever seen. It just flows through him. If you shut Jeff down, it's a wrap, man. You got to let Jeff just roll. You got to run. You can always go back and edit and whatever, all that good stuff. But you got to let him. You got to let Jeff just be Jeff, and just whatever comes through him and it's always great.
Well, you should do that with everybody, right? I mean, who's in the business of shutting people down? I mean, that's the number one fire hose.
And you know, that's exactly how a lot of people work.
That's exactly how it works. I can remember being in a co-write and someone said to me, "Oh, we can't start the chorus in a 2 minor." And I then went through like 8 songs that start massive songs of the century that start on the 2 minor. Like,
actually, I mean, I ran into that often, and I think it actually for a while actually screwed up my writing for a little bit, was that I got incredibly deferential and incredibly not as confident, because, you know, someone would be like, "Hey, that's not country." And I'm like,
right.
"Well, I know, but it's the first thing that came out of my mouth. I'm just getting going." And then they would just shut me down.
You're right, dude.
And
right.
And yeah, Shaq's right. I mean, I miss those days back in New York when we would just pick guitars up and just put the record on and just go. That's how I wrote in my room for years. And then that's how I started getting back. I will say this, Joe, about down here. I will admit, after Big and Rich and after Sugarland, I saw how much fun I was having writing with these incredibly talented artists. And having said that, Big and Rich were not Big and Rich when I wrote with them. They were 2 guys who came to New York on a writing trip. They weren't even a band at that point. So I can't, you know, be like, I got to write with a major artist. No, they were, you know, they were like, you know, 2 guys trying to get publishing deals. And bottom line is, I think I might have lost the plot a little bit between 2007 and 2012. And I think I started chasing a little bit. And as Shaq said, I would get into rooms with people here in Nashville, and if it was someone who had some success down here, all of a sudden I'd be like, "Okay, yeah, hey, you know what it is. I don't. Okay, fine." And I think I lost a little bit of the mojo that got me where I was.
Yeah. And
I was so interested in fitting in, and I was so interested in, you know, trying to fit into an area that I think it diluted my writing. And I think I probably, you know, I think in any writing situation, I tell everyone, you do have to read the room. And what I mean by that is, you know, all of us do different things. Some days you're the guy playing the music. Some days you're the guy doing the lyric. Some days you're doing both. Some days you just become the energy. Someone's on a roll. Get out of their way. You know, you have to be able to read the room, see where you best fit into that co-write, and use your superpowers to add to the song. And I think I lost a little, I didn't really lose confidence, but I didn't feel that I'm like, well, this person's had all these big hits. I should just let them, you know, like if they say that that this is the way to do it, just go with it.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, I wasn't being as myself as I should have been.
Well, that's the only thing that makes you stand out in a town like Nashville. There's people that will come here, they can learn the craft, and they can start dishing out songs that feel like everything. But when you're a publisher or you're on the road and people talk about songs before they're hits, you'll hear like, "Oh my goodness, this song is gaining traction in town." It's never a bullshit song. It's always got a ton of personality in it. It always has something that was like brought in by that person. You know, you can tell, like I'll hear a song on the radio and I'll say, "That's a Craig Wiseman song. I know that Craig wrote that song," or Jeffrey Steele's song, or people who, you know, put their personality into these songs. The latest Jeff Steele hit with what's his dude? Put That in Your Country Song. I mean, that sounds like you're talking to Jeff Steele at a gig.
Yeah.
It's 100% him, you know?
That was I remember, I forgot who it was here in Nashville when Postcard from Paris came on. Someone called me and goes, in the evening, in the morning, in the evening, you can catch me daydreaming. They go, "I wonder who wrote that line." And I'm like,
very Jeff line.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've always struggled writing with star artists. Like when you get in the room, the bar is so high, your self pressure of like getting something that day is, it's not your normal. You can't just sit back and start talking about your weekend and start cranking out songs. You should, but I've always kind of whiffed at some of those. I found like I left the room thinking, oh man, I blew that opportunity.
Well, it's interesting you say that, Joe, because I remember when I first Evan Jaron, unsigned when I wrote with them. Big and Rich, unsigned when I wrote with them. Pancho's Lament, that's me. I was in my room. I wrote that myself. Like all the initial stuff, the Mandy Moore, the Macy Gray, I wrote those. I wrote Macy Gray with Boots Ottestad, who's one of my best friends and one of the most talented guys I know. We were just hanging out. I'd gotten a call if I wanted to write something for this show. When I finally got a chance to write with a signed artist, I was probably about, like a big artist, I was probably about 4 or 5 years in after having a bunch of hits. Yeah. Because I didn't have a publisher and I didn't have a manager to get in these rooms. When I wrote Crazy for This Girl with Jaron, who's wonderful, amazing, Jaron got to go write with Michelle Branch and Mandy Moore and all those people.
Yeah.
I didn't write with any of them. And I remember, I agree with you, there was a definite pressure. Even when I was on the road with Sugarland, I knew I had from 12 till 3, 2 days in a row, to write with them. We'd meet for lunch at 12, and then we'd have from 1 to like 3 or 4 to write in the dressing room, and then they had to go do sound check. So I had basically 6 hours to get on that record. That was my one shot to write with them because they're so popular. I couldn't get out there. I had 6 hours to get on their record. Very luckily, I came through on the times I went, but I got to a point where I was like, hey man, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But those first few times, I felt pressure. Now, did I prepare? And did I have about 10 ideas in my pocket when I walked in there?
That's what I was going to ask you.
Absolutely. And when I started, man, I would come in a lot of times with verses and choruses, and I gave away so much shit. I can't even tell you that nothing ever happened. I just, this artist is going to be big here. I'll impress them. I just wanted to show everyone I belonged in the room.
Yeah.
I got to a point, and Jeffrey Steele, I think, was the one who actually told me this. When we did a thing in Hawaii together, and it was like, hey, if you're writing with someone who's a beginner, who's got nothing going on, either let them bring something in or start from scratch. If it's someone who's kind of in a similar place, then you can bring in an idea, or they can bring in or start from scratch. But if you're coming in, like if I'm going in with a Jeff Steele, or I'm getting a chance to write with, a Sugarland, I want to make sure that I offer something up, whether it's an idea, whether it's a title, whether it's a bit of a song, just to have in my pocket. Now, one thing I have learned is if you are working with a major artist, I will say, hey, I've got ideas, but is there anything that you really want to work on today that you think I'd be a good person to help you with and work with you on? I'd love to hear it. And that way, if an artist comes in with a song that they're emotionally invested in and that they're really into, then you have a better chance of them wanting to do that song. I've been burned a few times where I came in with a really cool verse and chorus, and they're like, this is awesome, let's work on it. And then at the end of the song, they're like, man, this is one of my favorite songs. I mean, I wouldn't do it, but who can we give this to? Right. And I'm just like, we spent 6 hours working on this, and I kept, because Shaq knows, he's worked with me and artists. I will constantly say, hey, are you cool with this? Is this something you would sing? Are you believing this? Because I honestly believe if you believe what you're writing, those are the ones that connect more. When I try to chase and when I try to write what I think someone else wants to hear, right, I'm screwed.
100%. 100%. I've always felt that way. It's like you write this song, you're like, oh, this would be really good for someone else or some country guy that will wear a big hat. And it's like, you have no context into that person's life.
No, and Shaq knows, because I've written with Shaq. I mean, I tell people up front, I'm like, look, I was raised on Jackson Browne and the Beatles and Van Morrison and Peter Gabriel and the Stones. Where I grew up, I mean, look, my dad only listened to classical music and freaking, opera. I mean, I didn't even know there was the Beatles till I was 9 or 10. But I just tell people when I work down here, I'm like, look, I did not have the good fortune of really listening to George Jones and Hank Williams and even Charlie Rich or whatever, like country scene in the 70s, 80s. I just didn't, occasionally you'd hear a Kenny Rogers song or Dolly Parton song as they crossed over, or Charlie Rich, most beautiful girl in the world. But I didn't really know that genre. So I'm like, listen, let me do what I do. Don't try to do what I'm doing. I'm not going to try to do what you do. And we're going to hit something that's really cool. It's never going to be a fastball down the middle in the country market, but it's still going to be in the strike zone.
Right.
It's going to paint the corners and it's going to get in there, but it's going to be a little bit different.
I've always hated when folks will come in, once you have a couple hits, people prepare when they're writing with you. And I've always hated it when people came in with ideas because they were so attached to these ideas that they already knew what they were. So like the idea that you could imagine it taking a turn or doing something different, they already had some ownership in it. So I've always preferred to just start from scratch.
I see both sides of the coin. I mean, to me, I was doing it for two reasons. A, because I wanted to prove that I belonged in the room, and I wanted to try to be like, oh, this guy's prepared. Look, this is good.
Yeah.
And two, I just knew that if I had 4 hours with someone and if I didn't knock it out of the park, I'd never see them again. I thought we'd have an advantage starting with a verse and a chorus. We'd get that done. But you have to be able to, you said something very key. If you bring an idea in, there are 90% of the ideas I bring in, I have to be prepared that those ideas can be ripped apart by the artist. Now, occasionally I'll bring an idea in and I'm like, look, I'm not married at all to this verse. This chorus is I hear it like this. If you don't want to keep the chorus like this, then let's work on something else.
Yeah.
So I say it up front if I'm married to a part of a song.
The other thing you said, which when folks come in with ideas and you have ideas, I always want them to go first. Because it's that whole like, oh, I know what I want to communicate to you, so I'm not even listening. Like you'll play them something and they're so wrapped up in what they want you to hear from them that they're not listening. It's like a conversation sometimes. So a lot of times great ideas that you came in with just get leapfrogged over because people aren't focused on them. So there's a whole art form in how you like present a song in a co-write, or an idea for a song in a co-write. It's a real nuance. You learn it the more you do it,
Well, like when Shaq, when we wanted to originally write Diddy on Up for P. Diddy at the time, who was really big. And Shaq said, well, why don't we make it Diddy on Up? And Laura Bell and I were like, dude, it's P. Diddy. We're married to this.
Oh, that's amazing.
Shaq prevailed.
But she's not going to cut Diddy on Up, though.
Yeah. We had fun writing that stuff, man. That was a good time.
Dude, that song, I tell Mike this story about that song. When that song came on the radio, I looked at my radio like there was an announcement that aliens had just landed in New York. It was so different. It was so out there that I loved it instantly for everything that it was.
Nashville had the opposite opinion, that it was like an alien was coming in. What the hell is this? We're scared.
Oh, I remember playing that. For anyone listening, it's this artist named Laura Bell Bundy that Jeff and I had worked with. But I remember playing that for people, including my publisher, and they looked at me like I was insane. And what is this? And this is garbage.
Yeah.
I had a major writer in town here where the video was #1. And Shaq can attest to this, Joe. I mean, this says something about Laura Bell, but I mean, she has more talent in her pinky than half of this town combined. I mean, she's so super talented. And she asked us to be in the video, and I'll never forget having dinner with her. We were writing that day, and she asked me to be in the video. And she's like, Jeff, you could play like the town drunk or a bartender, or you could play just someone in there. And I looked at her and I said, I don't know, Laura Bell. And she goes, what do you mean? And I go, well, usually when major artists ask me to be in their videos, I'm usually the love interest. She looked me, and she's like, Jeff, I got it. It's like, I promised a guy from Legally Blonde was in the Broadway show with, he's going to be the lead. I already promised him. I go, no, stop. I said, no, thank you, Laura Bell. I said, you're giving me, at this age, I need to segue into more mature roles. I've been that stud. I appreciate this opportunity. I will gladly play your town drunk or your just background guy.
I want to know what they offered Mike. What did they offer you in that video shoot?
I don't think I was offered. I don't remember this offer at all.
No, I think you couldn't make it. I think she did offer you just to be on the set like I was.
Giddy on up?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I was in the freaking video, but Joe, here's the deal. I'm supposed to be in LA the next day. The Yankees are in game 6, and my friend offers me a ticket to the freaking World Series. So I'm like, I've never done that. So I flew up to New York, saw the Yankees win the World Series, got home back to the city to my apartment at like 2 a.m, woke up at 5 o'clock, got on a plane to LA, and got to rehearsal that next afternoon.
Now that's a rock star right there.
Did the video, but Laura Bell, I will give her a lot of credit. About a half an hour later, she looked at me and she goes, "You're fucking with me, right?" I go, "Yes, of course I'm messing with you. You're gonna get a bald 40-something-year-old dude be your lead in your no."
So that's a really good question. I want to ask both of you this.
Yeah.
What moment? What's it like to be bald? That's what I want to know.
It's the best move I ever made. Shaving my head at 38. It was the best move. I've had a better social life.
You look great bald.
Well, thank you.
I have this fear that I would just shave my head and immediately regret it, and then spend the next 2.5 years growing it back through different stages or looking heinous.
Yeah, see, the growing back wasn't much of an option for me, but I will say, I mean, Shaq knows, because Shaq knew me back in the day. My dad was bald, and my dad always means well, but my dad went on a mission when I was 21 that his kid would not be bald like him, and his best friend got a hair plug job, and me in kicking and screaming and crying. I did not want to do it, and I just did not have the balls to stand up to my dad back then. And his argument, he's like, "Well, Sting did it." And, and I'm like, "Ooh, Sting." But, he just gave me all these arguments, and I did it. And unfortunately, the guy he sent me to, we found out later, ranked number 2 on the list of butchers in America. He sent me to a urologist, and Shaq can attest.
A urologist? Where was he putting the hair?
I think he was trying to cash in, because remember, back in the late 80s, it was the new thing to do.
Yeah.
These doctors were just cashing in. And Shaq knew me even after I tried getting it fixed a little bit. But I don't know if you remember before I tried getting it fixed, Mike, but I mean, I would seriously, every date I went on in the 90s, girls would just stare up at my head. "So you signed Jeff Buckley?" Oh. I mean, yeah, it sucked.
Oh, man. That's so funny.
Anyone listening, if you're going bald, let it go. Just do it.
Do it.
So much
All right.
better.
So off of your New York to LA for the video shoot thing, I want to ask you guys, what was the one moment in y'all's career over the 30 years where you looked at yourself and you said, "I can't believe that I'm doing this right now"? Like the biggest rock star moment of like, this has got to, I'm an imposter here, or this is like unbelievable that I'm in the middle of this and I'm actually the center of it.
Mike, do you want to go first, or should I? Or
gosh, feels like a daily feeling for me. I feel that every time I walk in the room with somebody, to be quite honest. Yeah.
No, I'm talking about being on a stage and somebody's handing somebody an award, or just something where you're just like, you're getting a number 1 statue handed to you, and you're.
say, besides being at Hogs and Heifers with Julia Roberts after Counting Crows concert, that was pretty much like, what the fuck am I doing here right now? That was pretty cool.
I had a moment. I remember writing with, remember David Cook? He won American Idol.
Yeah.
For some reason, David brought that out of me. And he was nice. It couldn't have been a nicer guy. Such a nice person, so talented. But I remember being in the room going, man, like, I remember really second guessing every single thing I did in that session. Every single thing. and just being like, man, and just nothing sounded right coming off my speakers. Nothing felt right.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he couldn't have been nicer. He was so polite, cool, man. Like,
there's so many opportunities along the way to feel awful about what we do.
I've had a couple of those, by the way. I did that with Danielle Bradbury. That was kind of rough too.
You feel better, Shaq? I tried to get a writing date with Danielle and I couldn't, because I think she's amazing. I mean, and I didn't try that hard. I mean, so I can't really put that out there. I mean, I asked once, but because I think she's got a tremendous voice, and I loved a lot of the songs she did on her first record. But yeah, I mean, and it happens, but Joe, I would say best moment would be Madison Square Garden.
Sounds good.
Taking my mom and dad to go see Josh Groban. And I had told Josh before the show, I got to see him. I told him my mom and dad were there. And he was walking through the audience doing my song that I wrote with my friend Oaks. And we were going there, and from the stage, he kind of looked over at us. And my mom looked over and she goes, I think he's looking at you. I go, I think he's looking at you, Mom. And after the show, I got to bring them back, and I got to introduce my mom and dad to Josh Groban, which was huge for my mom and dad to see a song being performed in Madison Square Garden. Growing up in New York, that's
come on,
Mecca. And to have mom and dad see one of my songs being performed at Madison Square Garden, then going to meet the artist.
Yeah.
And my mom completely choked. I was like, Josh, this is my mom. And my mom was like, you know, and then my dad, Josh, this is my dad. And my dad, being my dad, goes up to Josh and goes, you know, Jeff's got so many more songs that you could be singing. I'm like, be cool, Dad.
So you do have management.
Oh, God.
You do have a publisher.
Oh, God.
But there's just so many opportunities along the way for you to, you know, where you're always feeling down on yourself, or you're just sort of, it's the mountain is always visible above you. It's every once in a while you get one of those where you just really, you're grateful. And
and things, you have to enjoy that. I mean, you have to stop yourself along the way, and it can't always be about the goal. And we all get caught up in that, no matter who you are, and if you say you don't, you're lying. A lot of people are always looking. My ex-girlfriend used to say, you sometimes act as if you've never had a cut. You're only talking about what's next.
It's how we're wired.
And I said, well, here's the deal. That's going to keep me doing this and be fresh, 80 or 90 or whenever they put me.
Here's the flip side to that. It's like Jimmy Wayne told me he would continually come in and say, hey, we're at number 20. We're at number 15. We're at number 5. We're at number 1. All along the way, he'd say, go take your wife out. Like, he instilled that in me. And that was instilled in me early when I saw some really high profile people unhappy with their career. And I learned to appreciate it, you know, and be grateful, because they don't come around a lot. You get a couple in a career maybe, but it's just great when you could sit there and actually, you know, enjoy the show for a minute, you know, actually enjoy the reality that, okay, I'm going to push hard tomorrow, but today I'm just going to be grateful and sort of.
And I try to take those moments. I really do. I mean, I remember Mike knows I had found this artist and developed him and wrote 48 songs with him, and went over to England and spent about a year and a half just like setting the table and, you know, putting all the silverware out, the plates, before I invited everyone to the table, but kept telling everyone about this dinner that they were going to. And when I finally got a chance to, we had what I thought was ready to go, and finally got to meet with the labels. I remember walking back from BMG. We had already got an offer from Warner Brothers. I had a meeting with BMG and it went well, and it looked like we were getting an offer from them. And I remember walking on the street in London and just feeling like, wow, like,
right.
Like all this hard work we just did it just doesn't get better than this. To enjoy this moment, this moment right now. This is amazing.
That's good. That's it, man. We got to do more of that as creators. You got to take time to enjoy the art that you make, And whenever the art gets recognized, you get recognized. You got to show your parents what you do. They got to see you on a massive stage, maybe the most famous venue, arguably in the world. And they got to see somebody show respect for you and what you do. They cut your song, but then they actually took the time to admire you and bring you to the show and come back and talk. I mean, that's
Josh was super nice. He was a super nice guy. And the other thing is, you can't worry about what other people say. As Shaq said, like when we did Giddy On Up, one of my good friends in town here who had a song on the radio around the same time, he goes, yeah, I can't believe you wrote that, man. I've heard your other stuff, man. It's a lot deeper. And I'm like, you know what? That's bullshit. I said, number one, Christian Bush told me something. He said, number one, some songs change people's lives. Some songs change people's lives for 3 minutes and make them feel happy. He goes, yeah. They're both incredible songs. Number two, I said to this writer, go back and look at the lyrics on that song, look at the production on that song, and look at the melody on that song. I'm proud of every single thing on that song. That's a well-written song, man. And I said, just because it's a little different than you're used to hearing, that's your problem, man, not mine.
Yep. Good for you. Good for you.
Very Nashville to like getting outside the box too much.
Yeah. And you know what? If you haven't had any hits and you're watching this, or you're thinking about quitting your job and doing what Jeff has done and what Mike and I have done, even though I've never had a real job prior to this, give yourself a break, be yourself, show up, do what you love, and then enjoy when you do get some victory. It might just be that you got to hold. Take your wife out, take your girlfriend out, and enjoy it, man. Life's too short to be stressing about. We're not stockbrokers. We're songwriters.
Well,
Let's enjoy it.
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, I've been very lucky during the pandemic. I had 2 decent-sized hits over in England, and I was talking to a publisher here because I was contemplating maybe moving my admin or just, maybe just getting a team here. So I haven't had a team in forever, ever. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe let me see. I know I have these 2 hits. I have 2 themes out right now. I own my whole catalog. Maybe it's time. And he basically said to me, Jeff, no one gives a shit about your hits in England. And I was like,
I give a shit.
And you know what? I'm pretty damn proud of them.
Yeah.
That artist is really good. Those songs are good. And people in England are pretty happy with it.
Hey, money's money, Yeah,
well, like the money from the hits here, I'll tell you that much. It's not even close.
Well, hey, dude, thanks for coming on and hanging out with us. And I mean, man, you're not like, I don't know anyone else like you in regards to how you've scaled yourself creatively. So I admire that, and congratulations.
Joe, I'll say this, man. I've made so many mistakes in my 20 years as a songwriter in terms of maybe not making the right decision to partner with this person or to write with this person. But the truth is, I've made enough good decisions that I'm still doing it. So
That's it, right?
One lesson to learn is you're not always going to get it right.
That whole Babe Ruth thing where he struck out 10 times more than he hit home runs,
Yeah, but he hit a lot of home runs.
He hit a lot of home runs. Well, hey, man, I can remember a friend of mine was saying that someone was coming up to him after he spoke somewhere, a hit songwriter. His name was Tim Johnson. He said somebody was coming up and admiring him for his hits that he's had. And he said he compared himself to another songwriter. And he said if that other songwriter that had like 20 number ones had my career, they'd throw themselves off of a building. So let's get perspective here. The reality is be happy where you're at. Right. Have your hits, have your misses.
And also realize, and because Shaq knows a lot of my other catalog, I think most of my best songs have not even been cut.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I'll do some of these shows and I'll sneak 1 or 2 songs in, and people are like, who cut that? I'm like, no one.
Right. That's always been my favorite part when you play you play songs people know. And then, in a given set where you're playing a songwriter round where they're going from one to the other, acoustic guitars telling stories, you maybe get 5, 6 songs in a set. Yeah. So if you've got 3 or 4 songs that people know, you can play 1 song people don't know, or 2 songs people don't know. And when people come up after the show and say, what is that? They don't mention your hits. They say, what's that song? Where can I get that song? That's always made me feel great. Keeps me going. So. All right, pal. Where can people find you? Like online?
Well, a lot of times, pre-COVID, at some cool coffee shops and a lot of restaurants. And
so people should meet you at coffee shops if they want to work with you and write with you. I get it. Yeah. Just show up randomly at coffee shops.
Jeff, let's edit that out. Instagram, it's just at Jeff Cohen Music. And my Facebook is Jeff Cohen Poncho's, I think it's Poncho's Lament, or Jeff Cohen parentheses Poncho's Lament, because
underscore, tilde, asterisk, any other special characters in there.
And when I started Facebook, I guess I was still Poncho's Lament. We were, getting a bunch of stuff going on. That's a longer story than now, but that was some of the worst advice I ever got, was to stop doing that because people wouldn't take me seriously as a songwriter. And I was getting that advice while we were the #1 album on CD, baby. And we sold 16,000 CDs out of my living room without touring, without a manager, without a band.
That's awesome.
People were like, hey, man, if people think you're trying to be an artist, it's one thing for us to see you as a songwriter, which is kind of,
weird.
But if they think you're trying to be an artist at 35, man, that's a bad look. So, of course, like, okay. So I backed off. That was really a good move.
Well, hey, whatever you did, you lined it up perfectly because you've had quite a career. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff.
Stay safe, gentlemen.
All right, kids. That's it for today. Thank you so much. We're signing off from the West Barn. We'll see you next time.